The next morning didn't feel different. That was the first thing I noticed. No shift in the air, no weight pressing against my chest, no lingering echo from the night before. Just the same quiet house, the same light moving slowly across the kitchen floor, the same clock ticking with steady indifference. I woke up at 6:10 a.m., not because I had somewhere to be, because I always did. Routine doesn't disappear just because something ends. It continues, calm, uninterrupted. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, my hands resting lightly over the blanket. There was no rush to get up, no urgency waiting for me downstairs, no voice calling my name. Richard hadn't come home. I knew that without checking. The absence of sound told me everything I needed to know. I sat up slowly, placing my feet on the floor, letting them rest there before I stood. The house felt larger than usual. Not emptier, just wider, as if something had shifted in the space between the walls. I walked to the kitchen. The coffee machine blinked 6:12. I filled it the way I always had, water measured without thinking, grounds leveled without looking. Small, precise movements that didn't require attention. That was the difference. Nothing I did that morning required effort, not even the silence. The coffee brewed. The soft hum filled the room. I stood by the counter, watching the steam rise, not because it was interesting, but because it was steady, predictable. I poured a cup and carried it to the table. The same table. For a moment, I let my hand rest on the surface before sitting down. It still felt familiar, solid, unchanged. I sat there, both hands around the cup, feeling the warmth move slowly into my fingers. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, a door closed. Life continued. It always does. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my phone. I didn't replay the night before, because there was nothing left to understand about it. It had already been said. Clearly. Publicly. Without room for interpretation. She built this. I didn't repeat the words in my head. I didn't need to. They weren't something to hold on to. They were something that had already settled. I took a sip of coffee. Still hot. Still bitter. Still exactly the way I preferred it. I set the cup down and looked across the table. For years, that had been my position. Across from Richard. Numbers between us. Decisions waiting to be made. Now there was nothing there. No papers. No conversation. Just space. I stood up after a while. Not because I was finished, but sitting no longer served a purpose. I rinsed the cup, placed it carefully in the sink, and dried my hands with a towel I folded back into place. Everything returned to where it belonged. Order mattered. Even now. Especially now. I walked through the house slowly. The hallway. The living room. His office door was slightly open. I didn't step inside. I didn't need to. I could already see enough. The chair pushed back. Papers stacked unevenly. A jacket draped over the arm. Signs of movement. Of interruption. Of someone leaving without closing things properly. That had never been my way. I closed the door gently, not to shut him out, just to restore the line. I went back to the bedroom. My side of the closet was exactly as I had left it. Organized, consistent. I reached for a blouse, light gray, simple, structured, and laid it on the bed. Then a pair of dark slacks. Shoes placed neatly beneath. There was no event today, no meeting, no reason to dress with intention. And yet, I did. Because intention isn't something you reserve for other people. It's something you keep for yourself. I dressed without hesitation, each movement precise, each choice deliberate. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't search for change. I looked for alignment, and I found it. My hair was pinned back the way it always had been when something mattered. It still mattered, just not in the same way. I picked up my handbag from the dresser. It felt slightly heavier than usual, not physically, just differently. I knew what was inside. Documents, copies, things I had carried for years without thinking about them. Now they felt relevant. I didn't open it. I didn't review anything, because I already knew what I had. I walked back into the kitchen and checked the clock. 7:02. Still early, still quiet. I reached for my phone. It lit up immediately. Missed calls. 3. All from Richard. Time stamped between 1:14 a.m. and 2:03 a.m. No messages. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I set the phone back down, face down. No response. Not because I was avoiding him, because there was nothing to say. Not yet. The house remained still, unchanged. But I wasn't waiting anymore. That was the difference. I walked to the window and looked outside. The street was the same as it had been yesterday, and the day before that. Nothing had shifted there. But inside, something had settled into place. Quietly. Completely. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel relief. Just clarity. The kind that doesn't demand action. It prepares for it. I picked up my keys from the counter. Cold, familiar. I held them for a second longer than necessary, then placed them in my bag. Not rushing, not delaying, just moving. I walked to the front door. My hand rested on the handle. I paused. Not because I was unsure, because I was aware of where I had been, of what had been said, of what had not been said. Then I opened the door. The morning air was cool, clean, uncomplicated. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The sound was soft, final, but not in the way people expect. Not an ending, a separation. I walked down the driveway without looking back, because I didn't need to. Whatever had been behind me was already clear, and whatever came next would not begin with a conversation. It would begin with a decision, just not one I needed to make out loud. I didn't call anyone that morning, not my husband, not a friend, not even out of habit. Instead, I drove. No destination set, no urgency in the movement, just the quiet rhythm of the road beneath the tires and the steady passing of intersections I didn't need to think about. It wasn't avoidance. It was spacing, the kind you create when something has already shifted and you need to see it clearly, without noise. The city moved the same way it always did, people walking quickly, coffee in hand, traffic lights changing with mechanical precision, storefronts opening, deliveries being made, everything functioning, unaffected. I stopped at a red light and rested my hands on the steering wheel, my gaze fixed forward. For years, I had operated inside systems like this. Predictable, structured, every piece knowing where it belonged. And when something didn't, I corrected it, quietly, efficiently, without announcement. The light turned green. I didn't accelerate immediately, just a second longer than necessary. Then I moved forward. I ended up in a parking lot I hadn't planned on. A small office building, brick exterior, nothing remarkable. The kind of place you pass without remembering. I turned off the engine and sat there, still. The silence inside the car felt different from the silence at home, more contained, less familiar. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder, the same one from the night before, edges clean, papers aligned. I opened it slowly, not because I needed to review it, but because I needed to see it again. Ownership documents, original filings, dates that hadn't changed, signatures that couldn't be rewritten. I turned one page, then another. Everything exactly where it had always been. And for the first time, I wasn't looking at them as records. I was looking at them as leverage. That thought didn't come with emotion, just clarity. I closed the folder and placed it on the passenger seat. Then I reached for my phone. The screen lit up instantly. More missed calls. Richard again. This time earlier. 6:48 a.m., 7:15 a.m. No voicemail. Still nothing written. I didn't open the call log. I didn't scroll. I didn't respond. Instead, I tapped a different name. It rang once. Twice. Then, Margaret? His voice hadn't changed. Measured. Professional. Slightly cautious. Good morning, Alan. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, just enough to register the tone. I didn't expect to hear from you, he said. That's understandable. Another pause. This one quieter. Is everything all right? I looked at the folder beside me, then back through the windshield. Yes, I said. I believe it is. I could hear him shifting slightly, Not physically, mentally. Adjusting. That's not usually how people start these calls, he replied. No, I said. It isn't. Silence settled briefly between us. Then I spoke. I need you to review something. Of course. I'll send it now. I ended the call before he could ask anything else. Not abruptly, just completely. I picked up the folder again, removing a smaller set of documents I had already separated, prepared, without fully acknowledging why the night before. Now, I understood. I opened my email, attached the files. No explanation, no context, just a subject line. Review. I hit send. The message disappeared from the screen almost immediately. Clean, final. I set the phone down on the console and leaned back slightly in the seat. There was no anticipation, no tension waiting to build. Just process. Time passed. 5 minutes, then 10. The phone rang. Alan. I answered on the second ring. Yes? He didn't respond immediately. That, in itself, was unusual. Alan doesn't hesitate. Not with documents, not with numbers, not with structure. Margaret, he said finally, his voice lower than before. Where did you get these copies? I've always had them. Another pause, longer this time. I didn't fill it. I let him move through whatever he was seeing. These are the original filings, he said. Yes. And these signatures? I was there. Silence again, but different now. He wasn't processing information. He was recalibrating. Margaret, he said slowly, have there been any amendments since these were filed? Yes. Do you have them? I've seen them. That wasn't the same as having them. He understood that. I'm going to ask this carefully, he said. Were those amendments executed with your full authorization? I looked out through the windshield again. People walking past, unaware, uninvolved. No, I said. The word didn't carry weight. It didn't need to. He exhaled quietly. All right. Not surprised, not shocked. Just confirming. I need to verify something, he continued. Give me a moment. The line went silent, but he didn't hang up. I could hear faint typing, keys pressed in quick, precise sequences, accessing records, cross-referencing. Time passed again. I didn't move, didn't check the clock, didn't shift in my seat, because whatever he was about to say would not change anything. It would only clarify it. Finally. Margaret? Yes? These changes, they don't fully override your original position. I said nothing. He continued. There are discrepancies in how they were filed. Another pause. Then, more directly, your ownership wasn't removed. The word settled. Not heavily, not dramatically, just accurately. It was diluted, he added, adjusted, reframed. I closed my eyes briefly, not from relief, from recognition. And presented, he said, as if it no longer existed. I opened my eyes again. Yes, that's not the same thing. No, I said, it isn't. Silence returned, but this time it belonged to me, not to him. Margaret, Alan said carefully, do you realize what this means? I looked at the folder again, then at my hands resting in my lap. Yes, but I let him say it. You still hold enforceable rights. The phrasing was precise, legal, unemotional, and that's what made it clear. Depending on how this was handled, he continued, there may be grounds to challenge not just the amendments, but any decisions made under them. I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't understand, because I did, completely. Margaret, I hear you. He waited. You're not reacting, he said. No. Another pause. Most people would be. I'm not most people. That seemed to settle something. On his side. All right, he said. What would you like to do? I looked out at the building in front of me, Plain, unremarkable, functional, like everything that matters before it's noticed. Nothing, I said. For now. He didn't argue. He didn't push. He knew better. Understood. I'll review everything in detail, he added, and I'll prepare options. Thank you. I ended the call. Not because it was over, because it had begun. I sat there for a moment longer, the phone still in my hand. No shaking, no hesitation, just stillness. Then I placed it back down, reached for the folder, closed it carefully. And this time, it didn't feel like something I was holding on to. It felt like something I could use. I started the car. The engine came to life without resistance. Smooth, reliable, like it always had been. I pulled out of the parking lot slowly, merging back into the flow of traffic. Nothing around me had changed. Not visibly, not externally. But something had shifted. Not in the world, in position. Because for the first time since I had walked into that room the night before, I wasn't outside the structure anymore. I was just no longer inside it the way they thought. And that difference was enough. I didn't go home right away. Not because I was avoiding it, because there was nothing there that required my attention. Instead, I drove to a place I hadn't visited in years, a small public library, just off a quieter street, the kind of building that doesn't change much over time. Brick walls, tall windows, a parking lot that's never full. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment. Then I reached for the folder again. It felt different now. Not heavier, more defined. I stepped out of the car and walked inside. The air was cooler, quieter, the kind of silence that doesn't press, it holds. I found a table near the back, away from the windows, and sat down. No one looked up. No one needed to. I opened the folder again. This time, I didn't just glance at it. I read, carefully, line by line. The original incorporation documents were still intact, dated, signed, filed properly. My name was there. Not secondary, not supportive, primary. I ran my finger lightly along the line, not to confirm it was there, but to acknowledge that it had never left. Then I turned to the amendments, the newer documents, cleaner formatting, updated language, more polished, more strategic. I read those the same way, slowly, without skipping, without assuming, and the pattern became clear. Not immediately, but inevitably. The changes weren't removals. They were adjustments. Language shifted, percentages redistributed, control redefined in ways that didn't erase, but redirected. It was careful. Someone had taken the time to make it look complete, but not final. That distinction mattered, because final means irreversible. This wasn't. I leaned back slightly in the chair, letting the papers rest flat in front of me. For a moment, I didn't move. I just looked at the structure, not the words, the intent. And I saw it, not as a single action, but as a sequence, step by step, meeting by meeting, document by document, each one small enough to pass without resistance, each one reasonable enough to accept without question, until the accumulation felt like disappearance. But it wasn't disappearance, it was displacement, and displacement can be reversed. I reached for my phone again, not to call, to check something. I opened the email Alan had sent back. Short, precise, 3 bullet points. No unnecessary explanation. 1. Original ownership remains legally valid. 2. Amendments lack full authorization record. 3. Enforcement options available. I read it twice, not because I needed to understand it, because I needed to see how clean it was. No emotion, no interpretation, just fact. I locked the phone and set it aside. Then I went back to the documents. This time I looked at them differently, not as something that had been taken from me, as something that had been misrepresented. There's a difference. Loss is final, misrepresentation is temporary, and temporary things can be corrected. I picked up one of the amendment pages and held it slightly above the table. The signature section. Richard's name. Clear, confident, familiar. Below that, a space where my authorization should have been formally acknowledged. It wasn't missing. It was implied, referenced, not executed. That was the gap. Small, technical, but significant. I placed the paper back down, carefully, because this wasn't about catching a mistake. It was about recognizing a pattern. I closed the folder halfway, leaving one page visible. Then I folded my hands over it. Still, steady. For years, I had assumed the structure had changed beyond reach, that decisions had been made completely, that my position had been fully removed. But that assumption had never been verified, and now it didn't hold. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel vindication. Just correction. Of perspective. Of position. Of what I had believed to be true. I stood up slowly, gathering the papers back into the folder, aligning them, restoring order, not because they needed it, because I did. I walked toward the exit without looking around. No one stopped me. No one noticed. That was fine. This wasn't a moment that required witnesses. Outside, the light had shifted slightly. Later in the morning. Still calm. Still steady. I walked back to the car and placed the folder on the passenger seat. This time I didn't hesitate before starting the engine. There was no need to sit. No need to pause. Because the uncertainty that had been there earlier was gone. Not replaced by certainty. By clarity. I pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto the main road. Traffic had picked up slightly. People moving toward their day. Meetings. Deadlines. Decisions. I merged into it without effort, because I had always known how to move within systems. That had never been the issue. The issue had been understanding where I stood inside them. And now, that was clear. I reached a red light and stopped. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel. Relaxed, not tense. I looked straight ahead, not at the cars, not at the people, just forward. For years, I had believed something had been taken, removed, lost. But that wasn't accurate. It hadn't been taken. It had been shifted, positioned in a way that made it appear inaccessible, irrelevant, gone. But it was still there. And that changed everything. The light turned green. I drove forward. Smooth. Uninterrupted. Because once you understand that you never lost something, you stop thinking about getting it back. You start thinking about what it means. That it was never gone. The first call came before noon. I saw his name on the screen while I was still in the car, parked just outside a grocery store I hadn't intended to enter. I didn't reach for the phone. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was immediate, clean. I glanced at the screen only after it went dark. No voicemail. Of course not. Richard had never been someone who left messages. He preferred control, tone, timing. Voicemail didn't give him that. I picked up the phone, held it for a moment, then placed it back down beside me, face down. The car remained still, engine off, windows closed. For a second, I considered stepping out, going inside, continuing with something ordinary, but ordinary wasn't what the day required, so I stayed where I was. A few minutes passed. Then the phone rang again. Same name, same timing, more deliberate this time. I watched it light up the console, didn't move. Let it ring again. Longer, until it stopped. Still no message. That was new. Not the silence, the persistence. I leaned back slightly in the seat, my hands resting loosely in my lap. There was no urgency in me, no pull to respond, because whatever had shifted wasn't something that needed to be managed immediately.
It needed to be understood. And I already did. The third call came 5 minutes later. Closer, tighter spacing, less controlled. That told me more than anything he could have said. I let it ring. Again. Then stop. I turned my head slightly, looking out through the windshield. People moved in and out of the store. Carts rolling, doors opening and closing, life continuing at its usual pace, unaware of the recalibration happening somewhere else entirely. My phone lit up again. This time, a message. I picked it up. Not quickly, just when it made sense to. "We need to talk." I read it once, then again. The phrasing hadn't changed, but the weight behind it had. Before, it had always meant direction. Now, it sounded like request. I locked the screen, set it down. No reply. I started the car. The engine turned over smoothly, reliable, consistent. I pulled out of the parking space and onto the road. Not toward home, just forward.
The phone rang again as I approached the next intersection. This time, I answered. Not immediately. On the fourth ring. Yes. I didn't say his name. There was a pause on the other end. Short, but noticeable. Margaret. His voice was different. Not drastically, but enough. Less certain. More measured. "I've been trying to reach you." I noticed. Another pause. He adjusted. I could hear it. In the space between his words. "We need to talk," he repeated. I kept my eyes on the road. Traffic light ahead. Red. I slowed to a stop. "What about?" I asked. Simple. Direct. No edge. No invitation. Silence. Not because he didn't know. Because he was choosing how to say it. "About yesterday," he said finally. I didn't respond. I didn't confirm. I let the silence sit. He filled it. That situation, what was said, it wasn't planned. I know. The words came out evenly. No hesitation. No emphasis. Another pause. Longer this time. He wasn't expecting that. "You know?" he repeated. "Yes." The light turned green. I didn't move immediately. Just a second longer. Then I pressed the gas. "What exactly do you think you know?" he asked. There it was. The shift. Not control. Defense. I changed lanes slowly, signaling out of habit. "I think," I said, "that nothing said yesterday required explanation." Silence. Then, "That's not what I meant." "I understand." "You don't," he said, sharper now. "You couldn't possibly understand the position we're in." I let the words pass. Didn't interrupt. Didn't correct. Just listened. Because when people lose control, they explain more than they intend to. "We've been working toward this deal for months," he continued. "There are expectations, structures in place. You can't just—" He stopped himself. Mid-sentence. That too was new. "You can't just what?" I asked. Quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Because the sentence he had started didn't hold the same meaning anymore. "That's not what this is about," he said finally. "No," I said. "It isn't." Another pause. He exhaled. Audible this time. Less controlled. "Margaret," he said. His tone shifting again, softer now. "We need to sit down and talk this through." "I'm not unavailable," I said. Not agreeing, not refusing. Just stating. "When?" he asked. I checked the road ahead. Clear. Open. "Not today." Silence. "You're serious?" "Yes." He let that settle. I could hear him recalculating, adjusting expectations. "You've seen something," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. "You spoke to someone," he added. Still not a question. I remained quiet, because confirmation wasn't necessary. Understanding already was. "Margaret," he said, more firmly now. "If this is about paperwork or old filings, those were handled properly." I almost smiled. Not because it was amusing, because it was predictable. "Were they?" I asked. The words were light,
but precise. He didn't respond immediately, and in that silence, the shift completed itself. Not loudly, not dramatically, just definitively.
"I'll have someone send you everything," he said quickly, "so you can see it clearly. I've seen enough." Another pause. Short, sharp. "That's not possible." "It is." Silence again, but different now. Not searching, not adjusting, recognizing. "You've already made a move," he said. I didn't answer, because the answer was already there. In the way I spoke, in the way I didn't. "You should have talked to me first," he added. That one landed differently. Not as control, as habit. I turned onto a quieter street, easing off the accelerator. "I am talking to you," I said. Then I paused, just long enough. "Now." He didn't respond, because there was nothing left in that line for him to use. "Margaret, I'll let you know when I'm available." I ended the call. Not abruptly, not aggressively, just completely. The line went silent, and this time, it stayed that way. I set the phone down beside me and continued driving. No acceleration, no change in pace, just forward. Because the conversation hadn't been about resolution, it had been about position. And for the first time in a long while, I hadn't adjusted mine. He had.
I chose the location, not out of preference, out of structure. A private conference room in Alan's office. Neutral, quiet, no distractions that didn't belong there. A long table, 2 chairs positioned across from each other, and a window that let in just enough light to avoid shadows. I arrived 10 minutes early. Of course I did. The room was empty when I stepped in. I placed my bag on the table, not in front of me, but slightly to the side. Not defensive, not open, just positioned. I didn't sit immediately. I walked once around the table, noting the spacing, the distance between the chairs, the angle of the light. Then I chose my seat. Not at the head, not directly opposite the door, but where I could see both without turning. Control isn't about dominance, it's about awareness. I sat, hands resting lightly on the table, no documents in front of me, nothing to display, nothing to prove. The door opened at exactly 9:02. Richard. He stepped in without knocking. He used to knock. That detail didn't go unnoticed. He paused for half a second when he saw me already seated. Then he closed the door behind him. Carefully. More carefully than usual. He looked at the chair across from me, then at me. "You're early," he said. "I prefer it." He nodded. Didn't smile. Didn't sit immediately. Instead, he adjusted his jacket, then took the seat across from me. Not too close, not too far, but not exactly where it had been placed either. A small shift. Intentional. I watched it. Said nothing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room held it. That silence. Not uncomfortable, not strained. Just present. "You chose this place," he said finally. "Yes." Through Alan. "Yes." Another pause. He leaned back slightly, studying me. Not the way he used to. Not searching for agreement. Assessing. "You've been busy," he said. I didn't respond. He continued. "You've reviewed documents, made calls." Still not a question. I let the silence remain. He exhaled. Short. Controlled. "I didn't expect you to move this quickly." "I didn't move quickly," I said. I held his gaze. I moved when it was clear. That landed. He shifted slightly in his seat. Not visibly to most people. But I noticed. Of course I did. "What exactly do you think is clear?" he asked. I reached for my bag. Not hurried, not slow. Just deliberate. I opened it and took out a single document. 1 page. No stack, no display. I placed it on the table between us. Not sliding it toward him, just placing it. He looked at it. Didn't touch it yet. "Original filing," I said. He glanced up at me, then back down. His hand moved toward the paper. Stopped. Then continued. He picked it up, read the first few lines. Didn't flip it. Didn't need to. He knew what it was. "I've seen this," he said. "I know." He placed it back down, carefully. Aligned it with the edge of the table. "That doesn't change anything," he added. I didn't respond. He waited. I let him.
because what he said wasn't complete. These documents were amended, he continued. Updated. Legally. I tilted my head slightly. Were they? He met my eyes. Yes. I didn't look away. Fully. The word was quiet, but precise. He held my gaze. For a second longer than before. Then, that's how they were processed. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Short. Sharp. He leaned forward slightly now. Not aggressively. More. Engaged. You're questioning the process, he said. I'm observing it. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It isn't. Silence again. But this time, it carried something else. Not tension. Recognition. He shifted his attention back to the document. Then to me. What do you want, Margaret? The question came out cleaner than before. Less defensive. More direct. I folded my hands lightly on the table. I want clarity. You have it. I don't. His jaw tightened slightly. Just enough. Then be specific. I considered him for a moment. Not his words. His posture. The way he held himself. The way he was no longer leading the conversation. Authorization, I said. He didn't react immediately. That told me everything. These changes, I continued. Where is the full record of my authorization? He leaned back again. Slower this time. Measured. It was handled internally. That's not a record. It's documented. Where?
Silence. Longer now. He looked at the table, then back at me. You were aware of the restructuring, he said. That's not the same as authorizing it. You didn't object. I wasn't asked. The words settled. No emphasis. No escalation. Just fact. He didn't respond, because there was no place for him to move that wouldn't confirm something. I let the silence expand. Not to pressure, to allow. Because in space, people reveal more than they intend to. You stepped back, he said finally. I was repositioned. That was agreed. No, I said. It was presented. Another shift. Subtle, but real. He looked at me differently now, not as someone to manage, as someone to account for. That distinction matters to you, he said. Yes. Why now? I didn't answer immediately, because the question wasn't about timing, it was about assumption. You thought it didn't matter, I said. That's not what I said. It's what you built around. Silence. Again. But this time, he didn't try to fill it. He let it sit. That was new. I reached for the document again and slid it back toward myself, not reclaiming it, just repositioning. I'm not here to argue, I said. I'm not arguing. No, I agreed. You're explaining. And you're not listening. I am. I met his eyes. I'm just not agreeing. That landed differently. He didn't respond right away. He studied me, carefully, as if recalibrating something he thought he understood. This isn't how this was supposed to go, he said. No, I said. It isn't. Another pause. Then, what are you planning to do? The question was quiet, controlled, but underneath it, uncertainty. I didn't answer directly, because plans don't require disclosure, not at this stage. I'm reviewing, I said. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. He held my gaze, longer this time, trying to read something beyond the words. I let him, because there was nothing to hide, only something he hadn't seen before. This affects more than just you, he said. I know. The company is structured on documentation. I didn't raise my voice, didn't interrupt, just completed the thought. He stopped, because the sentence didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to the structure, and I understood that structure better than he did. We sat there for a moment, neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. But something had shifted, not dramatically, not visibly, just definitively. He straightened slightly in his chair. Keep me informed, he said. It wasn't a request, not quite, but it wasn't a directive either. I stood, slowly, without urgency. I'll let you know what matters. I picked up my bag. No sudden movements, no hesitation, just completion. He didn't stand immediately. He watched me, as if expecting something else. A reaction, a statement, something that would restore the balance he was used to. There wasn't one. I walked to the door, hand on the handle, then paused, not turning back, just aware.
"We'll need to revisit everything," he said behind me. I opened the door. "Yes," I said. Then I stepped out. And this time, he didn't follow.
Olivia didn't arrive with noise. That was the first thing I noticed. No hurried steps in the hallway, no raised voice outside the door, no attempt to interrupt the space before entering it. She knocked, lightly, twice, then waited. I was still standing just outside the conference room when I heard it. Richard hadn't come out yet. The door was still closed behind me. I turned slightly, watching the handle. It didn't move. She waited again, then knocked once more. Measured, controlled. That was her strength, not force, timing. I stepped aside, allowing the line of sight from the hallway to remain clear. Richard opened the door a second later. "Olivia," he said. Her expression didn't change when she saw me standing there. Not surprise, not discomfort, just acknowledgement. "Margaret," she said, offering a small, practiced smile. "Olivia." Her eyes moved briefly between us, assessing, not the situation, the positioning. She stepped forward slightly, just enough to be included in the space without asking for it. "I didn't realize you were both here," she said. The tone was neutral, polite, but the timing was exact. She knew. Of course she did. "I was just leaving," I said. I didn't move immediately. Neither did she. That was the moment. Small, almost invisible, but deliberate. She could have stepped back, given space. Instead, she held her position, not blocking, not yielding, just present. Richard glanced between us, then back to her. "We're done here," he said. That wasn't entirely accurate, but it was convenient. Olivia nodded. "Good," she said. "There are a few things we need to align on." She said it lightly, but not casually. Her attention shifted to me again. "I assume you've had a chance to review everything." I held her gaze. "Yes." She smiled slightly. Not wider, not warmer, just confirmed. "Then you understand the structure." "I understand it." Another pause. She tilted her head just a fraction. "As it stands," she added. There it was. Not correction, framing. I didn't respond. She continued. "We've spent a significant amount of time ensuring continuity," she said. "It's important that nothing disrupts that." Her voice was calm, even, almost reassuring, but the word choice was precise. Continuity, disrupt. Not about facts, about direction. I adjusted my bag slightly on my shoulder. A small movement, but it shifted the weight. "I'm not interested in disruption," I said. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, not visible to most, but enough. "Of course," she replied. "Neither are we." Richard remained quiet, watching, listening. That too was different. Olivia took a step forward, not closer to me, closer to the center, positioning herself between us, not physically blocking, structurally placing. "There may have been some misunderstandings," she continued, "about roles, expectations, documentation." She said the words carefully, layered, soft enough to sound reasonable, firm enough to define the narrative. "I don't misunderstand documentation," I said. The sentence was simple, unembellished. She paused, then smiled again, slightly more this time. "Of course not," she said. "That's not what I meant, but it was." I let the silence remain. She filled it. "What I'm suggesting," she added, "is that we move forward in a way that reflects where the company is now, not where it was, now." That distinction was intentional. I nodded once. "I agree." She seemed to relax slightly, only slightly. "Good," she said. "Then we're aligned." "No," I said. The word landed softly, but it didn't move. Her expression held, unchanged, but her eyes shifted. "What do you mean?" she asked. I didn't step closer. I didn't raise my voice. "I agree about moving forward," I said. "I don't agree with how you're defining it." Silence. Richard shifted slightly behind her. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge it. She stayed focused. "That's exactly what we're trying to clarify," she said. "No," I said again. "You're trying to finalize it." The difference settled. She let it sit, then adjusted, subtly. "We've been operating under a structure that has worked, successfully." "Yes," I said. "It has." Another pause. "But that doesn't make it complete." There it was, small, precise. She inhaled quietly, not visible, but present. "I think," she said, choosing her words more carefully now, "it's important that we don't complicate something that's already functioning." I looked at her, not critically, not dismissively, just directly. "It's already complicated," I said. Her smile didn't return this time. She held my gaze, steady. "You're introducing uncertainty," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm recognizing it." That shifted something. Not in the room,
In her, for the first time since she arrived, she didn't respond immediately. She recalculated, quickly. Then, "We can review everything together," she said, with counsel, transparently. The offer was clean, reasonable, strategic. "And then?" I asked. She paused. "Then we proceed." "How?" With clarity. I nodded slightly. "Defined by who?"
Silence. Short, but enough. Richard stepped in then. "Let's not do this here," he said. His voice was controlled, but it carried something else. Pressure. Olivia didn't look back at him. She stayed where she was, holding the center. "We're not doing anything," she said lightly. "We're just aligning." I watched her, carefully, because alignment, the way she used it, didn't mean agreement. It meant adjustment, to her structure, not mine. "I don't need alignment," I said. She blinked once, a small break in rhythm. "Then what do you need?" I adjusted the strap of my bag again, a quiet movement. "I need accuracy." The word didn't carry weight. It didn't need to. She nodded slowly. "As do we." I held her gaze. "I don't think we define that the same way." Another pause. This one longer, more exposed. Because now, the language wasn't enough to cover the difference. She took a small step back, not retreating, repositioning. "We should schedule a formal review," she said, with all documentation on the table. "Yes," I said. "That would be appropriate." Richard exhaled quietly. Relief. Subtle, but present. Olivia nodded once. "Good," she said. "Then we'll proceed that way." She turned slightly. Not fully. Just enough to shift the direction of the conversation. To close it. Efficient. Controlled. But as she did, her eyes met mine again. Just for a moment. And in that moment, there was no smile, no softness. Just calculation. Clear. Unhidden. Then it was gone, replaced by composure. She stepped aside, allowing space this time. I walked past her, not brushing, not avoiding, just moving. Because the conversation hadn't been about agreement. It had been about exposure, not of facts, of intent. And now, that was clear. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time, she wasn't managing the room. She was adjusting to it. And she knew it. I didn't schedule the next step immediately. Not that day. Not the next. Because timing, when it matters, isn't about speed. It's about placement. I let the silence hold. Not as avoidance, as structure. Richard didn't call again that afternoon. Olivia didn't reach out. That told me enough. They were working, reassessing, trying to understand what had shifted, and more importantly, what hadn't. I didn't interrupt that process. I prepared for it. 3 days later, I sat at my dining table again, the same one, but the papers on it were different now. Not old records, not memories. Active documents. Alan had sent them the night before. Clean, precise, drafted without excess language. I reviewed them once, then again. Not because they were complicated, because they were exact. There were 3 items, not 10, not 5, 3. Each one small, each one final. I picked up the first page. Formal request for internal audit review. No accusation, no implication, just a right. Exercised. I signed it. My hand didn't hesitate, didn't pause. The ink settled plainly on the line. I placed it to the side. Then the second.
Notice of review on governance amendments. Again, no confrontation, no escalation, just structure. I signed that one too. Same movement, same control. Then the third. I held that page a second longer, not because it required thought, because I understood what it would do. Temporary hold on pending structural agreements, including the deal. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I signed it. I closed the folder. Not slowly, not deliberately. Just done. Then I reached for my phone. Called Alan. He answered immediately. Yes. They're ready. I'll file them. I know. A pause. You're certain? Yes. No explanation. No elaboration. Just confirmation. I'll notify them once it's processed. He said. Thank you. I ended the call. The rest of the morning passed without interruption. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the counter, replaced the towel. Small movements. Consistent. Nothing about the house had changed. And yet, everything had. At 11:17 a.m., my phone rang. Richard. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I answered. Yes. Silence. Longer than before.
When he spoke, his voice was different again. Not uncertain, not defensive. Controlled, but tighter. What did you file? I didn't answer immediately, because the question wasn't necessary. You've seen it, I said. Another pause. That wasn't necessary. It was accurate. You've triggered a review process. Yes. That freezes everything. Yes. Silence. Then, that includes the Carter Agreement. I'm aware. His breath came through the line. Short. Measured. You should have discussed this first. I did. When? This week. Another pause. This one sharper. That's not what I mean. I know. Silence again. But now, there was no space left to adjust, only to react. You've put the company in a holding position, he said. No, I replied. The structure did that. That's not how this works. It is. I didn't raise my voice, didn't change my tone, just stated it. There are consequences to this, he said. I understand. Do you? Yes. Another pause. Then, what exactly are you trying to do? The question came out clean. Finally, I looked down at the table, at the space where the documents had been. Nothing there now. Clear. I'm not trying to do anything, I said. I'm allowing what already exists to be seen. Silence. Heavy this time. Not because it was loud, because it was complete. The call ended shortly after. Not abruptly, just finished. I didn't move right away. I stayed seated, hands resting lightly on the table, because the action itself was already done. There was nothing to follow. No second step. No escalation. That was the point. By early afternoon, the effect had reached beyond the phone calls. Emails began. Not to me, but I knew. Alan forwarded one. Short. Formal. Internal. All external agreements pending structural review are temporarily suspended. Clean. Final. No emotion. No explanation. Just effect. I stood and walked to the window. Looked out at the street. Nothing had changed. Cars passed. People moved. The world didn't stop.
It never does. Even when something underneath it does. At 2:03 p.m., another message. Not from Richard. Not from Olivia. From someone else. Internal. Brief. We've been notified of a hold. Please confirm status. I didn't respond. It wasn't mine to confirm. That was the structure. The company wasn't collapsing. Nothing dramatic. No visible damage. Just paused. Held. Waiting. I turned away from the window and walked back to the table. Ran my hand lightly across its surface. Smooth. Unchanged. Because control doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes, it looks like stillness. Enforced. My phone lit up again. A message this time. Olivia. Short. Controlled. We need to resolve this quickly.
I read it once, then set the phone down. No reply. Because this wasn't something that would be resolved quickly. Not anymore. I moved to the sink, rinsed a glass, set it aside, dried my hands. Each movement, quiet, measured, the same as before, the same as always. Nothing had been taken back. Nothing had been argued. Nothing had been forced. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't demanded anything. I hadn't even asked. I had simply used what was already mine. And now, everything else had to stop. Until that was acknowledged. He didn't call first. That was the difference. No announcement. No message asking for time. No attempt to position the conversation before it happened. He arrived. I was at the same table. Late afternoon. The light had shifted again. Lower now. Softer. Stretching across the surface in long, quiet lines. The house was still. No television. No background noise. Just the sound of something distant outside, and the occasional movement of air through the vents. I heard the car before I saw it. Not because it was loud. Because it was unfamiliar. Different engine. Different rhythm. I didn't stand. I didn't go to the window. I remained where I was. Hands resting lightly on the table. Waiting. Not in anticipation. In awareness. A moment later, the doorbell rang. Once. Not repeated. I stood then. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just when it made sense. I walked to the door and opened it. He stood there. Daniel Carter. Same as the night before. No change in posture. No shift in expression. Calm. Controlled. Present. He didn't offer a greeting. Neither did I. We looked at each other for a brief moment. Then I stepped aside. Come in. He entered without hesitation. No glance around. No curiosity about the space. Just a quiet acknowledgement of where he was. I closed the door behind him. The sound settled. Final. He moved into the living room, but didn't sit immediately. His attention moved once. Across the room. Across the structure. Then returned to me. You filed the hold, he said. Not a question. Yes. A pause. Not long. Good. The word landed clean. Without emphasis. Without approval. Just alignment. I gestured toward the table. He sat. Nodded the head. Not beside. Across. Intentional.
I took my seat as well. Same position as before. Same posture. Nothing changed. Everything had. He placed his hands lightly on the table. No documents. No phone. Just presence. I reviewed the filings. He said, "Yes. They're incomplete." "Yes." He nodded once. Small. Precise. Deliberately. He added. I didn't respond, because that wasn't something I needed to confirm. He continued. They structured it to appear final. They did. Another pause. Then, it isn't. No. Silence. But not empty. Just. Understood. He leaned back slightly in the chair. Studying. Not me. The situation. You didn't challenge it earlier. No. Why? I looked at him. Because it wasn't necessary. He held my gaze. Then nodded again. As if that answer fit something he had already concluded. And now it is. Yes. Another pause. Short. Controlled. Chiming. He said. Not asking. Not suggesting. Just stating. Yes. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. Closer now. Not intrusive. Just. Engaged. The hold stops the agreement. Yes. For everyone. Yes. He considered that. Not as a problem. As a condition. They'll try to resolve it quickly. He said. They already are. He almost smiled. Not visibly. But there was a shaft. They won't be able to. No. Silence again. Then. What do you want?
The question was direct, uncomplicated. I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know, because I didn't need to say it yet. What do you think I want? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Accuracy. Yes. Another nod. Then, control. I held his gaze. Yes. No denial. No adjustment. Just confirmation. He sat back again, satisfied. Not with the answer, with the clarity. I don't invest in uncertainty, he said. I know. I don't invest in structure that can be challenged after execution. Yes. Another pause. Then, but I do invest in structure that reveals itself before execution. The words were precise. Measured. I didn't respond. Because that was his position, not mine. And this, he continued, revealed itself. Yes. Silence. Then he shifted slightly. Not in posture. In direction. They presented a version, he said. They did. You allowed it. Yes. And now you've corrected it. I've exposed it. That landed. Clean. He nodded once. That's more valuable. A pause. Then, I'm not interested in renegotiating with them. I didn't react. Didn't lean forward. Didn't shift. Just listened. I'm interested in moving forward with what's real, he said. Silence. Then he added, that's you. The sentence didn't carry weight. It didn't need to. It carried direction. I held his gaze. Not surprised. Not acknowledging. Just receiving. They built around you, he said. But not without you. Yes. And they can't complete this without you. No. Another pause. Then, I won't proceed without you. Clear. Final. I didn't respond immediately. Because that wasn't a decision I needed to make in that moment. What does that look like?
I asked. He didn't hesitate. Direct. How? You define it. Silence. Longer now. Not tension. Space. For structure. For terms. For control. He didn't fill it. He didn't guide it. He left it where it belonged. With me. You're not asking me to return, I said. No. You're not asking me to support their structure. No. You're asking me to replace it. Yes. The word came without pause, without hesitation. I leaned back slightly in the chair, not withdrawing, repositioning. Then we're not discussing the same agreement, I said. No, he replied. We're not. Silence. Then, what happens to them? I asked. He looked at me. Not evasive, not dismissive. They adjust. How? That depends on you. Another pause. Then, or they don't. The meaning was clear. No explanation needed. I let that settle. Not as leverage, as structure. Because this wasn't about choosing sides. It was about recognizing where the center had shifted, and where it now stood. He reached into his jacket. Not hurried, not concealed. He placed a single card on the table. No branding, no excess, just contact. Call me when you've decided, he said. Not if, when. He stood. I remained seated. Not because I couldn't stand, because I didn't need to. He moved toward the door, stopped briefly, not turning fully, just enough. You didn't lose anything, he said. Then, you just stopped using it. He opened the door and left. The house returned to silence. The same as before, but not the same. Not anymore. I looked at the card on the table. Didn't touch it. Didn't move it. Just observed. Because the conversation hadn't changed anything. It had confirmed it. I stood after a moment. Walked to the window. Looked outside. The light was fading. Evening approaching. The day moving forward. As it always does. Behind me, on the table. Everything was still, but not inactive. Not waiting. Just positioned. Because for the first time, they weren't deciding what happened next. I was.
I didn't call him that night, or the next morning. The card remained where he had left it, on the table, unmoved. Not ignored, just not yet used. The house returned to its usual rhythm. Quiet, ordered, predictable. I made coffee the same way. Measured, precise. I sat at the same table, the same chair, the same light moving across the surface in slow, deliberate shifts. Nothing about the space had changed. And yet, everything had. My phone rang twice that morning. Richard. I didn't answer. Not because I was avoiding him, because I had already heard what he needed to say. It had just taken him longer to understand it. At 10:14 a.m., an email arrived. Subject line: Request for immediate resolution. I opened it. Brief. Carefully worded. Legal language softened into something that sounded cooperative, but wasn't. They wanted to move quickly. Close the gap. Reestablish direction. I read it once, then closed it. No reply. At 11:02, another. This time from Olivia. Shorter. More direct. We can resolve this without escalation. I didn't open it again. The sentence had already said enough. I stood and walked to the window. Looked out. Same street. Same movement. Nothing interrupted.
nothing paused. Except what they had built. I turned back toward the table. The card was still there. White. Simple. Uncomplicated. I picked it up, turned it once between my fingers, then set it down again. Not yet. Instead, I reached for my bag, removed the folder, placed it on the table, opened it. The documents were exactly where I had left them, aligned, undisturbed. I didn't read them again. I didn't need to. I closed the folder. Then I reached for my phone, scrolled once, found his name, pressed call. He answered on the first ring. Yes. I reviewed everything. I assumed you would. A pause. What have you decided? I didn't answer immediately. Not because I was unsure, because decisions, when they're final, don't require urgency. They don't need to be replaced, I said. Silence. Then, no. No. Another pause. Short. Measured. Explain. I'm not returning to their structure. I didn't expect you to. And I'm not rebuilding it. That held. Longer this time. Then, what are you doing? I looked down at the table. At the space where everything had been. At the place where it had all started. I'm separating it. Silence. Clean. Uninterrupted. You're dividing the company. I'm restoring what was already divided. Another pause. Then, that changes the deal. Yes. For everyone. Yes. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't evaluation. It was confirmation. What do you keep? He asked. I answered without hesitation. The part I built. And the rest? They can manage what they created. A breath on the other end. Not reaction. Recognition. You're not negotiating. No. You've already decided. Yes. Another pause. Then, I'll adjust accordingly. I know. The line held for a moment longer. Then, when should I expect the revised structure? He asked. Today. Send it directly. I will. I ended the call. No follow-up. No clarification. No extension. Just done. I placed the phone down, reached for the folder, removed a separate set of documents. Prepared. Already structured. Already complete. I reviewed the first page, then the second, then signed. Not slowly, not carefully, just correctly. By early afternoon, everything was in motion. Not loudly, not publicly, but precisely. Legal filings, structural separation, ownership defined without interpretation, no discussion, no negotiation, just execution. At 2:27 p.m., my phone rang again. Richard. I looked at it, let it ring, then answered. Yes. His voice came through immediately. What did you do? No greeting. No pause. Just the question. I clarified the structure. You divided the company. I corrected it. You can't do that without. I already did. Silence. Sharp. Tight. You've removed yourself. No. Another pause. Then, what does that mean? I leaned back slightly in the chair. It means I'm no longer inside what you built. And what about what we built? I let that sit. Just long enough. That's what I kept. Silence. Longer now. Then, you're making a mistake. No. You're walking away. No. Another pause. Then, you're changing everything. Yes. The word settled. Clean. Final. You should have talked to me first. I did. That's not what this is. It is now. Silence. Then, what happens next? The question came out differently. Not controlled. Not leading. Just asking. I looked at the table. At the empty space. At the place where everything had been decided. You continue. I said. With what? With what's left. Silence. Then? And you? I stood. Picked up my bag. I don't continue. I said. Another pause. Then what do you do? I walked toward the door. Hand on the handle. Then I answered. I choose. I ended the call. Opened the door. Stepped outside. The air was cooler. Evening settling in. The light softer now. Quieter. I didn't look back. Because there was nothing behind me that required it. They had asked me to stay quiet. And I had. Until I no longer needed to.